Good morning. It's Juju, and this is day 155 of this administration. And so I'm sitting watching the sunrise over the river at my friend's house where I'm staying. So I'm in my hometown of Reading, and today I'd like to talk about loving your neighbor. I've been thinking about my neighbors a lot because I'm returning to the place where I grew up, and which is very different from where I live now. And when I was growing up, I have had interesting neighbors all of my life. Um, when I was first growing up, on the one side of the fence, we had Don and Bill, a gay couple, though it was Don, Bill, and their dog Poncho. And, I didn't understand what gay meant. And it was just like, to me, they were just best friends. They were kind. One of them worked at Wonder World at the time in the bakery and would bring us, the day-old donuts he'd show up in the morning with day-old donuts. Then on the other side of the fence, we had Mary and Gary, who was a young hippie couple. And, this is back in the 60s, early 60s. And, but they were wonderful too. But I remember my dad, who was a very conservative guy, was looking over the fence and he's like, "Wow, those are some healthy tomato plants, Gary." And Gary looks at him and he says, "Those aren't tomato plants, Ed." And what did my dad do? Did he immediately call the cops? "Oh my God, there's illegal activity going on here." I mean, there is a commandment if you're a Christian, and I wish all religions, especially at this moment, would go back to their base beliefs. And I think a core one is we're supposed to love our neighbor. We're not supposed to turn in our neighbor. I mean, one of the things that I hate most about what's happening now is people are living in fear, and you have this power like, "Oh, I'm going to turn in this undocumented person." There was someone in Napa who was a pillar of the wine community, had been here for 30 years, a contributor. What would make you want to have that person thrown to the ground, humiliated, handcuffed? What pleasure is there in that? And whether he's documented or not, um, and I think when you're in a period of time when you can turn in your neighbor, what does that sound like to you? Calling in tips about, undocumented people, It sounds like Nazi Germany. It sounds like Russia. It sounds like these countries that we do not espouse to be. We don't want to live in a country of fear, I have had all sorts of neighbors. I have, when I first moved to the community I live in, I was warned about burning. Well, there's burning permits. Is it a burn day? Do you have a fire going on a burn day? Are you doing house projects without building permits? Could your house be red tagged? Are you speeding? There's so many things that people can be doing that could have consequences. Have you never broken the law yourself? But they broke the law by coming here, So I think that we need to have more compassion. Earlier I had, a neighbor who was a hoarder. We have neighbors in the, barking dogs, people playing their music loud, driving crazy. There's so many things. There's a lot of ways to not like your neighbor. But then there's, I do love my neighbors. I love all of my neighbors. I love my new neighbors. I love my old neighbor who's an electrician and helped us when we had, our house almost burnt down. My neighbor behind has cat sit for us. I'm staying with an 85-year-old, and her neighbor brought dinner, complete, dinner, salad, roll, all up in little Tupperware containers. That is what we want more of in this country. Not, fear and reporting, but kindness. Be kind, sharing lemons if you've got a lemon tree. Saying hello. I wave to every Every time I walk the neighborhood, which I do every day, I wave to every vehicle that passes because they're all my neighbors. Now, in my community before, I was scared to move to my community because it had a very bad reputation. You want to talk about neighbors, the worst thing that happened with neighbors is that, these two neighbors, and this was 20, 25 years ago, something like that, their conflict, they just kept, this was about access to the road, bypass. He was using, the one guy was trying to build on the property and it escalated and escalated until the one guy killed his neighbor out of self-defense. I mean, I've heard different things about how the whole thing went down, but he burned the body in the bonfire, and the sheriff showed up, and there was like a couch and a leg sticking out of the fire. That's not it happens. It happened in my neighborhood, but that's not what we want. So love your neighbor, Don't go reporting them for, indiscretions, or even be concerned, I mean, one thing that Tim Wall said is mind your own damn business, and kind of describing the Midwest thing. The other thing is when you live in a community like I do up in the mountains where there's mudslides and road washes off and trees come down and the power is out, you look after your neighbors, and that is true. I remember there is one who's a head of a Facebook group for my neighborhood, and he said, I may be an asshole, but I am also the first person that will help you when you're in times of need. And I take my daughter to school, and he is probably an asshole. I don't know him personally, but both things can be true. I've talked about multiple truths being true. So for today, why don't you follow, if you have a spiritual practice, follow that in terms of focusing on goodness and being a force of goodness, loving your neighbor, rather than trying to find evil in the world. Because evil and hardness is hard to find, but so is goodness and kindness and compassion if you look for it. So this is Juju, unscripted, unedited, unfiltered. I'm going to turn around and watch that sun rise. So lead with love, be a good neighbor, be a good friend, be a force for good rather than for evil in this country.